I am Rebecca Thompson, 31 years old, and 6 months ago, I walked into a sterile room with monitoring equipment attached to my chest, knowing that the results would either vindicate me completely or destroy what remained of my reputation forever. The polygraph examiner looked at me with professional detachment as he asked the final question that would determine whether my family would ever believe me again. When those results were made public 3 days later, they didn't just prove I was telling the truth, they exposed a web of manipulations so elaborate that even I hadn't understood its full scope. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My life before everything fell apart was carefully constructed around routine and achievement. I worked as a marketing director for Henderson & Associates, a mid-size firm in downtown Portland, Oregon, where I had been steadily climbing the corporate ladder for the past 8 years. My corner office overlooked the Willamette River, and I had earned the respect of both colleagues and clients through consistent results and innovative campaigns. Success had always come naturally to me, perhaps because I approached everything with meticulous planning and attention to detail. I lived in a renovated Victorian house in the Hawthorne district that I had purchased 3 years earlier, complete with original hardwood floors and a garden where I grew herbs and vegetables. My weekends followed a pleasant pattern of farmers market visits, hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, and dinner parties with my close circle of friends. I had been dating Michael Rodriguez, a software engineer, for about 18 months, and our relationship was progressing toward the kind of serious commitment I had always envisioned for myself. The foundation of my stable, predictable life was my family. My parents, David and Helen Thompson, lived just 45 minutes away in Lake Oswego, in the same house where my younger sister Carmen and I had grown up. Every Sunday, we maintained a tradition of family dinner that had continued unbroken since I moved out for college. These gatherings were the anchor point of my week, filled with my mother's elaborate cooking, my father's stories from his work as a civil engineer, and the easy banter between Carmen and I that came from 29 years of sisterhood. Carmen was 2 years younger than me, and we had always been close despite having completely different personalities. Where I was methodical and career-focused, she was spontaneous and artistic. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, taking on projects that interested her rather than pursuing traditional advancement. Her apartment in Southeast Portland was a bohemian contrast to my organized home, filled with vintage furniture, canvases in various stages of completion, and the creative chaos that seemed to fuel her imagination. Our relationship had always been built on mutual support and genuine affection. Carmen was the first person I called when I received promotions or faced challenges at work. I was the one she turned to for advice about difficult clients or when she needed help managing her finances during lean periods between projects. We had shared secrets, inside jokes, and the kind of trust that I believed could withstand anything life might throw at us. The extended Thompson family was equally tight-knit. My paternal grandmother, Ruth Thompson, was 86 years old and still lived independently in the same house that my father had grown up in. Every other Saturday, Carmen and I would visit her together, helping with household tasks and listening to her stories about raising 5 children during the 1960s and 70s. These visits were sacred to all of us, and Grandma Ruth often said that seeing her granddaughters get along so well was one of her greatest joys. My maternal uncle, James Mitchell, and his wife, Patricia, lived nearby with their 2 teenage children, my cousins Tyler and Madison. Family barbecues at their house during summer months brought together 3 generations, creating the kind of memories that I expected would continue for decades to come. Uncle James had always been particularly close to me, serving as a mentor when I was starting my career and offering advice that helped shape my professional trajectory. The social circle I had built in Portland reflected my personality and values. My closest friend, Sarah Chen, was an architect who shared my love of hiking and trying new restaurants. We had met in a pottery class 5 years earlier and quickly bonded over our shared experiences as driven women in traditionally male-dominated fields. Sarah knew me better than almost anyone and could read my moods with uncanny accuracy. Another dear friend, Jennifer Walsh, was a pediatric nurse who brought out my more nurturing side. She and her husband Kevin had been trying to have children for several years, and I had been their emotional support through the challenges of fertility treatments. Jennifer was the friend I turned to when I needed perspective on relationships or family dynamics, and her study wisdom had guided me through numerous personal challenges.
My professional reputation was something I had built carefully over nearly a decade. Colleagues knew me as someone who delivered on promises, met deadlines without fail, and brought creative solutions to complex marketing challenges. I had earned 3 promotions in 8 years and was being considered for a senior director position that would represent the culmination of everything I had worked toward in my career. The marketing campaigns I developed were known for their thorough research and innovative approaches. I spent months studying target demographics, analyzing competitor strategies, and crafting messages that resonated authentically with consumers. My success rate was impressive enough that other departments often requested my input on their projects, and I had begun speaking at industry conferences about effective campaign development.
Financial stability was another cornerstone of my well-ordered life. I've been disciplined about saving money since my first job out of college, building an emergency fund and contributing consistently to retirement accounts. The mortgage on my house was manageable, and I had recently begun exploring investment opportunities that would secure my long-term financial future. This careful planning gave me a sense of security and control that I valued deeply. My relationship with Michael was progressing along the timeline I had envisioned for a serious partnership. We had met through mutual friends at a hiking group and discovered shared interests in outdoor activities, cooking, and travel. Michael was reliable and supportive, encouraging my career ambitions while pursuing his own goals in software development. We had begun discussing moving in together and had even looked at a few houses that could accommodate both our lifestyles and career needs. The rhythm of my days was satisfying and purposeful. Mornings began with coffee and news reading in my sunny kitchen, followed by a commute through Portland's tree-lined streets to my downtown office. Work challenges engaged my analytical mind and creative instincts, while evenings were often spent with Michael, friends, or working in my garden. Weekends brought hiking adventures, social gatherings, and the peaceful solitude I needed to recharge for the following week. My self-image was that of someone who had figured out how to build a meaningful life through hard work, integrity, and maintaining strong relationships. I took pride in being dependable, whether that meant meeting professional commitments, being present for friends during difficult times, or maintaining the family traditions that connected me to my roots. The trust that others placed in me was something I considered sacred, and I had never given anyone reason to question my honesty or reliability. Looking back, I realize how much of my identity was wrapped up in being seen as the responsible, successful daughter and sister. Carmen and I had naturally fallen into complementary roles where I was the planner and she was the dreamer. I was the steady one and she was the adventurous one. This dynamic had worked well for both of us throughout our lives, creating a balance that our parents often commented on with pride. The stability of my world felt unshakable in those final weeks before everything changed. I was preparing for a major presentation that could secure the promotion I had been working toward, planning a weekend getaway with Michael, and looking forward to Grandma Ruth's 87th birthday celebration that Carmen and I were organizing together. The future stretched ahead with the promise of continued growth, deeper relationships, and the gradual building of the life I had always imagined for myself. I had no way of knowing that the foundation I had so carefully constructed was about to be tested in ways I could never have anticipated. The trust I had placed in my family, the reputation I had built professionally, and the sense of security that came from being known as someone whose word could be trusted completely were all about to be challenged by accusations that would turn my ordered world upside down. The phone call that shattered my world came on a Thursday evening in March, while I was reviewing campaign proposals at my kitchen table. The spring rain was pattering against the windows, and I had just opened a bottle of wine to accompany the Chinese takeout that I had ordered from my favorite restaurant down the street. When my phone buzzed with my mother's ringtone, I answered without looking up from my work, expecting our usual brief check-in about weekend plans. "Rebecca, we need to talk." My mother's voice was strained in a way I had never heard before, tight with an emotion I couldn't immediately identify. "Your father and I are coming over. We'll be there in 20 minutes. "Mom, what's wrong? Is everything okay? Is it Grandma Ruth?" I closed my laptop, suddenly focused entirely on the conversation. My parents never made unannounced visits, especially on weeknights evenings. "We'll discuss it when we get there," she said, and the line went dead before I could ask any more questions. 23 minutes later, I heard their car in my driveway. Through the front window, I watched my parents walk toward my door with expressions I had never seen before. My father's face was set in hard lines,
His jaw clenched in a way that reminded me of how he looked when dealing with difficult contractors at work. My mother walked slightly behind him, her shoulders hunched as if she was carrying an invisible weight. I opened the door before they could knock, studying their faces for clues about what could have brought them here so urgently. "What's going on? You're scaring me." They entered without their usual greetings or comments about my house. My father stood in the center of my living room with his arms crossed, while my mother perched on the edge of my sofa, her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. "Sit down, Rebecca." My father's voice carried an authority I hadn't heard since I was a teenager in trouble for breaking curfew. "I'd rather stand until you tell me what this is about." My mother looked up at me with eyes that seemed to be searching my face for something. "Carmen came to see us today. She told us about what happened at work." The words made no sense to me. "What about work? What did she tell you?" "About the Henderson account. About what you did to get that promotion." I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest. "I have no idea what you're talking about. What did Carmen say I did?"
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My mother's voice was barely above a whisper. She said you stole the Morrison campaign ideas from your colleague, the one who was supposed to get the promotion instead of you. She said you've been taking credit for other people's work for months. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I sank into the armchair across from them, trying to process what I was hearing. That's completely false. Every campaign I've worked on has been my own work. Why would Carmen say something like that? She said she's been worried about you for weeks, my father continued, his tone suggesting he had already decided what to believe. She said you've been acting differently, more secretive, more defensive when she asks about work. She said she found out about the stolen ideas from someone who works at Henderson. Who? Who told her this? I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. My parents exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. She said it was confidential, that the person could lose their job if it got out that they were whistleblowing, but she felt she had to tell us because she's concerned about your integrity. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This is insane. Carmen doesn't even know anyone who works at Henderson. I've never introduced her to my colleagues because she's not interested in corporate work. How could she possibly know anything about my campaigns? She said she met this person through her graphic design work. Apparently, they had worked with Henderson before and recognized your campaign materials as being stolen from their friend who still works there. The story was becoming more elaborate and less believable with each detail, but I could see from my parents' faces that they were taking it seriously. Did Carmen give you any proof, any documentation, anything other than this anonymous accusation? She said the person was too scared to come forward officially, my mother said, her voice defensive. But Carmen showed us some of the campaign materials. She said they were identical to work that had been presented internally months before you submitted them. Carmen showed you campaign materials from Henderson? How would she have access to internal documents from my company? I was struggling to keep my voice level, but panic was beginning to set in. Those documents could be fabricated. Timestamps can be manipulated. Why are you believing this without even asking for my side of the story? We are asking for your side, my mother said, but her tone suggested she had already made her mind. We're here because we want to hear your explanation. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. My explanation is that this is completely untrue. Every campaign I've worked on at Henderson has been my original work. I have documentation of my creative process, emails showing the development of ideas, meeting notes where I presented concepts. I can prove that everything I've claimed credit for is legitimately mine. My father's expression didn't change. Carmen said you would say that. She said you've become very good at covering your tracks. The casual way he delivered that statement made me realize how thoroughly Carmen had prepared them for my denials. She's thought of everything, hasn't she? Anonymous source, stolen documents, predictions about how I would respond. Doesn't any of this strike you as suspicious?
What strikes us as suspicious, my mother said, her voice sharper than I had ever heard it, is that our daughter is being accused of something this serious, and instead of being horrified and wanting to clear her name, you're immediately attacking your sister's credibility. I'm not attacking her credibility. I'm trying to understand why she would make false accusations against me. I sat back down, leaning forward to make eye contact with both of them. Has Carmen ever shown any interest in my work before? Has she ever asked detailed questions about my campaigns or expressed concern about my ethics? They were quiet for a moment, and I could see doubt flickering across my mother's face, but my father remained firm. People don't make stories this detailed unless there's truth behind them. Actually, that's exactly what people do when they want to destroy someone's reputation. The more detailed the lie, the more believable it seems. Why would Carmen want to destroy my reputation? My mother asked, but there was less conviction in her voice now. I don't know, I admitted, but I intend to find out. The conversation continued for another hour, going in circles as I tried to defend myself against accusations I couldn't fully understand. My parents left without resolution, promising to look into things further, but making it clear that Carmen's story had shaken their faith in me.
After they left, I sat in my living room trying to process what had just happened. The sister I had trusted completely had apparently spent considerable time and effort constructing an elaborate lie designed to destroy my professional reputation and turn our parents against me. The worst part was that she had done it so skillfully that my own parents were questioning my integrity. I called Michael immediately, needing to hear a voice that would offer support instead of suspicion. "Something terrible has happened," I said when he answered. "Carmen has told my parents that I've been stealing work from my colleagues." "That's ridiculous," Michael said without hesitation. "You're the most ethical person I know. Why would she say something like that?" His immediate belief in my innocence was such a relief that I nearly started crying. "I don't know, but she's convinced my parents that it's true. They came over here tonight treating me like I was already guilty." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to prove that every piece of work I've claimed is legitimately mine," I said, "and then I'm going to find out why my sister decided to destroy my life." The next morning, I arrived at work early and began documenting everything. I printed emails showing the progression of my ideas, saved drafts of campaigns showing their development over time, and gathered meeting notes where I had presented concepts to colleagues. The Morrison campaign that Carmen had specifically mentioned was one I had worked on for 3 months, and I had extensive documentation of every stage of its creation. By noon, I had assembled a comprehensive file proving my authorship of every major campaign I had worked on in the past year. But as I sat looking at the evidence, I realized that proving my innocence was only half the battle. The other half was understanding why this was happening at all. I decided to call Carmen directly, hoping that confronting her might shed some light on her motivations. When she answered, her voice was cheerful and normal, as if she hadn't just spent the previous day attempting to destroy my career. "Hey, Rebecca, what's up?" "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon?" "Sure. Is everything okay? You sound weird." Her performance of innocence was so convincing that for a moment I wondered if there had been some terrible misunderstanding. "I'll explain when I see you. Can you meet me at Stumptown on Division at 3? When I saw Carmen that afternoon, she looked exactly like the sister I had always known. Warm, genuine, concerned about my well-being. She hugged me hello and immediately launched into questions about why I had sounded upset on the phone. "Mom and Dad came to see me last night. They said you had told them some very serious things about my work." For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her expression, a tightening around her eyes that was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Then her face filled with confusion and concern. "What are you talking about? I haven't talked to Mom and Dad about your work."
The lie was so bold and delivered with such apparent sincerity that it took my breath away. My sister, who I had trusted with my deepest secrets, was looking me directly in the eyes and denying something I knew for certain she had done. The weeks following Carmen's denial at the coffee shop became a crash course in navigating a reality I had never imagined possible. I was living in two completely different worlds simultaneously: the professional environment where I was respected and trusted, and the family sphere where I was suddenly viewed with suspicion and doubt. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. At Henderson and Associates, I threw myself into documenting every aspect of my work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. I created detailed timelines showing the evolution of each campaign, saved every email chain related to project development, and began recording meetings where I presented ideas to colleagues. The Morrison campaign that Carmen had specifically mentioned was one I had worked on for 3 months, and I had extensive documentation of every stage of its creation. By noon, I had assembled a comprehensive file proving my authorship of every major campaign I had worked on in the past year. But as I sat looking at the evidence, I realized that proving my innocence was only half the battle. The other half was understanding why this was happening at all.
I decided to call Carmen directly, hoping that confronting her might shed some light on her motivations. When she answered, her voice was cheerful and normal, as if she hadn't just spent the previous day attempting to destroy my career. "Hey, Rebecca, what's up?" "We need to talk," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Can you meet me for coffee this afternoon?" "Sure. Is everything okay? You sound weird." Her performance of innocence was so convincing that for a moment I wondered if there had been some terrible misunderstanding. "I'll explain when I see you. Can you meet me at Stumptown on Division at 3? When I saw Carmen that afternoon, she looked exactly like the sister I had always known: warm, genuine, concerned about my well-being. She hugged me hello and immediately launched into questions about why I had sounded upset on the phone. "Mom and Dad came to see me last night," I said, watching her face carefully. "They said you had told them some very serious things about my work." For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across her expression, a tightening around her eyes that was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Then her face filled with confusion and concern. "What are you talking about? I haven't talked to Mom and Dad about your work." The lie was so bold and delivered with such apparent sincerity that it took my breath away. My sister, who I had trusted with my deepest secrets, was looking me directly in the eyes and denying something I knew for certain she had done. The weeks following Carmen's denial at the coffee shop became a crash course in navigating a reality I had never imagined possible. I was living in two completely different worlds simultaneously: the professional environment, where I was respected and trusted, and the family sphere, where I was suddenly viewed with suspicion and doubt. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. At Henderson and Associates, I threw myself into documenting every aspect of my work with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. I created detailed timelines showing the evolution of each campaign, saved every email chain related to project development, and began recording meetings where I presented ideas. My assistant, Diana Flores, noticed my behavior immediately. "Rebecca, you're acting like you're preparing for an audit," she said during one of our weekly planning sessions. "Is everything okay with the Morrison account?" I had to make a split-second decision about how much to share. Diana had worked with me for 3 years and knew my work habits better than anyone. If there were questions about my integrity, she would be one of the first people investigators would contact. "There have been some questions raised about the originality of some of my work," I said carefully. "I want to make sure I have comprehensive documentation of my creative process." Diana's eyebrows shot up. "Questions from who? Your campaigns are clearly your work. I've seen you develop them from initial brainstorming to final presentation." Her immediate defense of my integrity was gratifying, but it also highlighted how unprecedented the situation was. In 8 years at Henderson, no one had ever questioned my work. The campaigns that were now being called stolen were ones that colleagues had complimented, that won industry recognition, that had generated significant revenue for our clients. I began reaching out to team members who had collaborated with me on the disputed projects. Jennifer Park, a junior designer who had worked on the Morrison campaign, was puzzled when I asked her to document her memories of our creative sessions. "Why would you need me to do that?" she asked. "Everyone knows the Morrison concept was your breakthrough. You presented it in the all-hands meeting back in January, and the whole room was impressed with your market analysis approach." "I'm just being thorough about record keeping," I said, not wanting to alarm her with talk of accusations. "Would you mind sending me an email describing your recollection of how the campaign developed?" Jennifer's email, when it arrived the next day, was detailed and supportive. She described watching me work through multiple iterations of the campaign concept, remembered specific conversations where I had explained my strategic thinking, and noted how the final product reflected ideas I had been developing for months. It was exactly the kind of testimony that would vindicate me, but I was beginning to understand that facts might not be enough. The strain of maintaining professional normalcy while dealing with family crisis began taking its toll. I found myself second-guessing interactions that had previously been automatic. When my supervisor Robert Manning complimented my work on a new client pitch, I wondered if he had heard rumors about the accusations. When colleagues invited me to lunch, I analyzed their tone for signs of suspicion or withdrawal. Sleep became elusive. I would lie awake replaying the conversation with Carmen, searching for clues I might have missed about her motivations. During the day, I functioned normally, but nights were consumed with questions that had no answers. Why had she chosen these specific campaigns to target? How had she created fake documentation that my parents found convincing? Most importantly, what did she hope to gain from destroying my reputation? My relationship with Michael became a crucial anchor during this period. He was the only person who knew the full scope of what was happening, and his unwavering belief in my innocence provided the emotional stability I needed to keep functioning. We spent hours analyzing Carmen's possible motives, trying to identify any incidents or resentments that might explain her actions. "Has she ever seemed jealous of your career success?" Michael asked during one of our evening debriefings over dinner. "Not that I've noticed," I said, though I was beginning to question my ability to read people accurately. "She's always seemed happy with her freelance work. She's never expressed interest in corporate advancement." "What about financially? Has money ever been an issue between you two?" I thought about the times I had helped Carmen with rent during slow periods, the expensive birthday gifts I had given her, the family vacations I had subsidized to ensure she could participate. "I've always helped her when she needed it. I thought she appreciated that." "Maybe that's the problem," Michael suggested gently. "Maybe she resented needing help." This perspective had never occurred to me, but it opened up new possibilities for understanding Carmen's behavior. Perhaps my success and stability had created a dynamic that bred resentment rather than gratitude. Perhaps every time I had offered financial assistance, I had unknowingly highlighted the disparity between our situations. The isolation from my family was perhaps the most difficult aspect of this period. My parents had requested space to process everything and canceled our Sunday dinner tradition indefinitely. When I called my mother to check on Grandma Ruth, the conversation was stilted and uncomfortable, filled with awkward silences and careful word choices. "How is she feeling this week?" I asked about my grandmother. "She's fine," my mother replied, but she didn't extend the usual invitation for me to visit. "She's been asking about you, but we thought it was best not to worry her with family complications right now." The implications were clear. I was now considered a family complication rather than a beloved granddaughter. The woman who had helped raise me, who looked forward to our visits and depended on our help with household tasks, was being kept away from me based on accusations I couldn't even properly defend against because I didn't understand their origin. I decided to reach out to Uncle James, hoping that his perspective might be different from my parents'. James had always been a rational, analytical person, and I thought he might be more willing to examine the evidence objectively. When I called him, his tone was cautious but not hostile. "Rebecca, your mother told me there have been some concerns about your work situation.
Uncle James, I need you to know that the accusations are completely false. I have extensive documentation proving that all my work is original. But more importantly, I'm trying to understand why Carmen would make these claims. There was a long pause. Are you suggesting that Carmen is lying? I'm suggesting that someone has given her false information, or that there's been a serious misunderstanding, I said carefully. I know this is a difficult situation for everyone, but I'm hoping you might be willing to look at the evidence I've gathered.
James agreed to meet with me, and I spent the weekend preparing a comprehensive presentation of my documentation. I organized emails chronologically, created visual timelines showing the development of each disputed campaign, and gathered testimonials from colleagues who had witnessed my creative process. The file was substantial enough to constitute a legal brief. When I met James at his office the following Monday, I could see that he was taking the meeting seriously. He reviewed my documentation methodically, asking detailed questions about specific emails and timeline entries. His engineering background made him naturally analytical, and I watched his expression change as he absorbed the evidence. "This is very thorough," he said finally. "The documentation clearly shows your work developing over time. But I have to ask, could this have been fabricated after the fact?" "Uncle James, look at the email timestamps and the meeting notes from other people," I said. "For this to be fabricated, I would have had to convince multiple colleagues to lie about dates and conversations that happened months ago. That's not just unlikely, it's practically impossible." He nodded slowly. "I see your point. But then how do you explain the documents Carmen showed your parents?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think someone needs to examine those documents more carefully. Digital files can be manipulated. Timestamps can be changed. If Carmen received these materials from an anonymous source, how can we verify their authenticity?" This conversation with James marked a turning point in my approach to the crisis. Instead of simply defending myself, I needed to actively investigate the source of the accusations. If Carmen had been giving false information, then someone else was orchestrating this attack on my reputation. If she had created the false documentation herself, then her motivations were even more troubling than I had imagined. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Webb, a former police detective who specialized in corporate fraud cases. His office was sparse and professional, and his approach was refreshingly straightforward. "What you're describing sounds like a systematic character assassination," he said after reviewing my situation. "The question is whether your sister is a victim of manipulation or the primary architect. Either way, there's a trail we can follow." Marcus explained that digital documents leave traces that are difficult to eliminate completely. Even if timestamps had been changed, metadata analysis could reveal when files were actually created and modified. If Carmen's anonymous source existed, there would be communication records somewhere. If the source was fictional, that would become apparent through investigation. "I need you to understand that this investigation might uncover things about your family relationships that you won't want to know," Marcus warned me. "Are you prepared for the possibility that the people you trust most might be involved in something intentionally harmful?" I thought about the sister who had shared my secrets, the parents who had raised me to value honesty above all else, the extended family who had always been my support system. A month earlier, I would have said that none of them could be capable of deliberate betrayal. Now, I wasn't sure of anything. "I need to know the truth," I said, "whatever it costs." The investigation would take time, and meanwhile, I had to continue living my life under the shadow of suspicion. I developed new routines designed to protect myself professionally while I waited for answers. Every significant work decision was documented in writing. Every creative session was recorded. Every client interaction was followed up with detailed email summaries. My colleagues began to notice my changes in behavior, though most attributed it to stress about the upcoming promotion decision. Sarah Chen, my closest friend outside the family, finally confronted me about my obvious anxiety.
Rebecca, you've been acting like someone who's expecting to be attacked. What's really going on? I made the decision to trust her with the truth, and her reaction was immediate and furious. Carmen said, "What? That's absolutely insane. Anyone who knows you would laugh at the suggestion that you would steal someone else's work." Her outrage on my behalf was therapeutic, but it also highlighted how isolated I had become. The people who knew me professionally had no doubt about my integrity, while the people who knew me personally had been turned against me by a carefully constructed lie. I was living in parallel universes where completely different versions of my character existed. As the first month of the crisis passed, I began to understand that this was not a misunderstanding that would be quickly resolved. Someone had invested significant time and effort in creating a believable case against me. The accusations were detailed enough to seem credible and vague enough to be difficult to disprove. Whoever was behind this understood both my professional life and my family dynamics well enough to craft an attack that would cause maximum damage to both. 6 weeks after the accusations first surfaced, I had developed a new rhythm of life that incorporated both investigation and damage control. Marcus Webb's preliminary findings had yielded some encouraging results, and I was beginning to build a systematic defense against whatever was happening to my reputation. The initial panic had transformed into determined action, and I was discovering strengths I hadn't known I possessed.
The private investigation had uncovered several inconsistencies in Carmen's story that gave me hope. Marcus had traced the supposed whistleblower from Henderson and Associates and found no employee matching the description Carmen had provided to my parents. The graphic design connection she claimed also proved to be fabricated. No one at Henderson had worked with freelance designers on the projects in question, and the company maintained strict internal creative standards that prohibited outsourcing campaign development. Your sister either received very sophisticated misinformation or she created this story entirely from her imagination, Marcus reported during one of our weekly meetings. The technical details about your industry are accurate enough to sound credible, but the specific claims about personnel and processes don't match reality. More importantly, Marcus had begun tracing the digital documents Carmen had shown my parents. The metadata analysis revealed that the files had been created recently, not months earlier as the timestamps suggested. Someone with technical skills had manipulated the creation dates, but they had left traces that forensic analysis could detect. Whoever did this knows enough about document manipulation to fool casual inspection, but not enough to fool a thorough forensic examination. This suggests either amateur-level technical skills or professional-level work done hastily. At Henderson and Associates, I had begun building alliances that would protect me if the accusations ever became public. I scheduled individual meetings with key colleagues, ostensibly to discuss ongoing projects, but actually to reinforce their positive impressions of my work and character. I volunteered for high visibility assignments that would demonstrate my capabilities and commitment to the company. Robert Manning had assigned me to lead the pitch for our biggest prospective client of the year, Cascade Electronics. The project would require 3 months of intensive work and would be presented to their board of directors in June. Landing this account would represent a major victory for Henderson and would solidify my reputation as one of the firm's most valuable assets. I'm giving you this opportunity because I trust your strategic thinking and your ability to deliver exceptional results, Robert told me when he announced the assignment. The Cascade account could define the next phase of our company's growth. I accepted the assignment with enthusiasm, partly because I was excited about the creative challenge, but mostly because success on this project would make it much harder for anyone to question my professional competence. If I could land Cascade Electronics, any future accusations about stolen work would seem ridiculous in comparison. The Cascade campaign became my outlet for the creative energy that had been disrupted by the family crisis.
I threw myself into research about their industry, their competitors, and their target demographics with an intensity that impressed even my most dedicated colleagues. Jennifer Park, who was assigned to support the visual elements of the campaign, commented on my thoroughness during one of our brainstorming sessions. "Rebecca, I've never seen you this focused on market analysis," she said as we reviewed demographic data late one evening. "The level of detail you're developing is incredible." "I want to make sure we understand every aspect of their business environment," I replied, though the real reason was that I was documenting every thought, every decision, and every creative breakthrough in case I ever needed to prove my authorship again. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my personal support network with people who knew the real story. Sarah Chen had become my primary confidant, and our regular hiking trips had evolved into strategy sessions where we analyzed each development in the investigation. Her architectural background made her naturally systematic, and she helped me organize the evidence I was gathering into a coherent narrative. "You need to think of this like a legal case," Sarah advised during one of our weekend hikes in Forest Park. "You're not just proving your innocence, you're building a case for who actually created the situation and why." Jennifer Walsh, my nurse friend, provided a different kind of support. Her experience dealing with family medical crises had given her insights into how relationships could be damaged by stress and misinformation. She helped me understand that my parents' reaction, while painful, was not necessarily permanent. "People can change their minds when they're presented with clear evidence," Jennifer assured me during one of our coffee meetings. "Your parents love you. They're just confused right now because they've been given false information by someone they trust." I had also begun documenting every interaction with family members, creating a record that might be useful if the situation escalated further. Phone conversations with my mother were brief and formal, but I noted the dates and content of each exchange. Uncle James had remained more open to communication, and I was gradually sharing Marcus's findings with him as they developed. "The forensic analysis of those documents is very compelling," James admitted during one of our regular check-ins. "If the timestamps were manipulated, that changes everything about Carmen's credibility." Through James, I learned that my parents were struggling with doubt about their decision to cut off communication with me. My mother had apparently expressed regret about missing my recent birthday, and my father had questioned whether they should have insisted on more evidence before taking sides in the conflict. "They're starting to realize that they acted too hastily," James told me, "but they're also embarrassed about doubting you, which makes it harder for them to reach out." I began planning how to present the investigation results to my family in a way that would allow them to accept the truth without losing face. This required delicate, strategic thinking about timing, presentation, and emotional dynamics. I wanted vindication, but I also wanted to preserve the relationships that could be salvaged. My relationship with Michael deepened during this period as he proved himself to be completely reliable under pressure. He accompanied me to difficult meetings, helped me analyze evidence, and provided emotional support during the worst moments of doubt and frustration. His steady presence became the foundation that allowed me to function professionally while dealing with personal crisis. "I keep thinking about how well you're handling this," Michael said one evening as we reviewed the latest investigators' report. "Most people would have fallen apart by now, but you've turned it into a systematic campaign to find the truth." "I don't have a choice," I replied. "If I fall apart, whoever did this wins." We had also begun discussing what would happen after the truth came out. Would my family relationships recover? Would there be legal consequences for whoever had created the false documentation? How would I handle the revelation of Carmen's involvement, whether as victim or perpetrator? "I think you need to prepare for the possibility that Carmen knew exactly what she was doing," Michael said gently. "The evidence is pointing toward deliberate deception, not manipulation by someone else." This was the possibility I had been trying to avoid confronting. If Carmen had orchestrated this attack on my reputation deliberately, it meant that the sister I had loved and trusted for 29 years was someone I had never really known. It meant that our entire relationship had been built on foundations that were less solid than I had believed.
To distract myself from these troubling thoughts, I channeled even more energy into the Cascade Electronics campaign. The project was developing into something truly innovative, a multi-platform approach that combined traditional marketing with social media engagement and experiential marketing events. The concept was ambitious enough to differentiate Henderson from our competitors while being practical enough to implement within Cascade's budget constraints. Diana Flores had become an invaluable partner in developing the campaign details. Her organizational skills complemented my strategic thinking, and together we created timelines, budgets, and implementation plans that addressed every aspect of the client's needs. The thoroughness of our preparation was attracting attention from senior management, who were beginning to see the Cascade pitch as a showcase for the firm's capabilities. "Word is getting around that you're developing something special," Robert Manning mentioned during a brief hallway conversation. "The partners are very interested in seeing your presentation." I had also begun speaking at industry events again, accepting invitations I had initially declined due to the family crisis. These appearances served multiple purposes. They demonstrated my continuing professional engagement, they reinforced my reputation among industry peers, and they created public records of my expertise and character that would be valuable if accusations ever became public. At a marketing conference in Seattle, I presented a workshop on innovative campaign development that received enthusiastic response from attendees. Several participants approached me afterward to discuss collaboration opportunities, and one industry magazine requested an interview about my strategic approach to client challenges. "Your reputation in the industry is stronger than ever," observed Linda Chen, a colleague from a competing firm who attended my presentation. "Whatever you're doing lately is working. You seem more focused and confident than I've ever seen you." The irony was that the crisis that had threatened to destroy my professional reputation was actually strengthening it. The intense documentation and analysis I was doing for self-protection was improving my work quality, and the strategic thinking I was applying to my personal situation was enhancing my professional capabilities. By the end of April, I had constructed a parallel life that functioned efficiently despite the ongoing family crisis. My professional relationships were stronger than they had been before the accusations. My friendship with Sarah and Jennifer had deepened through shared adversity. My relationship with Michael had proven itself capable of withstanding serious stress. And most importantly, I had developed confidence in my ability to handle complex, emotionally charged situations with intelligence and determination. The investigation was progressing toward conclusions that would soon require me to make difficult decisions about how to proceed. Marcus Webb estimated that within another month, he would have sufficient evidence to definitively identify who had created the false documentation and how it had been disseminated to my family. The question was whether I would use that evidence to clear my name quietly or to expose the deception publicly. "You need to think about what outcome you want," Marcus advised during one of our progress meetings. "Do you want private vindication, or do you want accountability for whoever did this?" I was beginning to understand that those might be mutually exclusive goals. Private vindication would preserve family relationships, but would leave the perpetrator free to attempt similar attacks in the future. Public accountability would provide complete vindication, but might damage family bonds beyond repair. The choice would define not just how this crisis ended, but what kind of person I wanted to be going forward. The first sign that my carefully constructed stability was about to be tested came through an unexpected source. On a Tuesday morning in early May, Diana Flores knocked on my office door with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of concern and confusion that immediately put me on alert. "Rebecca, there's something you need to know," she said, closing the door behind her. "I just got a very strange call from someone claiming to be conducting a background investigation about you." My blood went cold. "What kind of background investigation?" "The caller said they were verifying employment information for a potential client who was considering hiring you as a consultant," Diana explained. "But the questions were weird. They weren't asking about your work quality or your project management skills. They were asking about your relationships with colleagues, whether I had ever observed you taking credit for other people's work, whether there had been any internal complaints about your integrity." I felt the familiar panic rising in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. What did you tell them? I told them that in 3 years of working with you, I had never seen anything but exemplary professional behavior, Diana said firmly. And then I told them that if they were conducting a legitimate background check, they should go through proper HR channels instead of calling individual employees directly. Did they give you a name or say which company they represented? They said they were from Thomson Verification Services, but when I asked for contact information so you could follow up directly, they said they would call back later. That was 2 hours ago, and I haven't heard from them again. I thanked Diana for the warning and immediately called Marcus Webb. His response was swift and alarming. "This sounds like someone is trying to build a case against you professionally," he said. "The fact that they're calling your workplace directly suggests they want to create a paper trail of inquiries about your integrity. Even if everyone defends you, the mere existence of an investigation can be damaging." "Can you trace Thomson Verification Services?" "I'm already on it," Marcus said, "but I suspect it's either a fictitious company or a legitimate firm that's been hired by someone who gave them false information about why they need the investigation." Within hours, Marcus confirmed that Thomson Verification Services was a real company based in Phoenix, but they had no record of conducting any investigation related to me. Someone had been impersonating their employees to make the call seem legitimate. "This is escalating," Marcus told me during an emergency meeting that afternoon. "Whoever is behind this is moving beyond family manipulation into professional sabotage. We need to identify them quickly before they cause irreversible damage to your career." I called Robert Manning to give him a heads up about the fake investigation, framing it as a possible case of mistaken identity or corporate espionage. His reaction was reassuring, but also concerning. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention," he said. "We've had issues with competitors trying to poach talent in unethical ways. I'll alert HR to be cautious about any external inquiries regarding our employees." The conversation went well, but I could see doubt flickering in Robert's eyes. Even though he believed my explanation, the mere fact that someone was investigating me had planted seeds of uncertainty. This was exactly what the fake investigators had intended to accomplish. That evening, I called Uncle James to update him on the new developments. His response revealed information that made the situation much more serious. "Rebecca, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Carmen has been asking a lot of questions about your work lately. Specifically, she's been trying to find out details about your colleagues, your projects, and your company's internal processes." "What kind of questions?" "She called me last week asking if I knew anything about Henderson's hiring practices. She wanted to know if I had any contacts in the marketing industry who might know people at your company. She said she was considering a career change and was curious about corporate environments." The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Carmen hadn't just made up accusations against me. She was actively investigating my professional life to make her lies more convincing and to find ways to cause additional damage. "Did you give her any information?" I asked. "I mentioned that Patricia's nephew works in marketing for a firm in Seattle and that I could ask him about industry connections if she was serious about changing careers. But Rebecca, if Carmen is behind these fake investigations, then she's not just lying about me. She's conducting a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation."
The revelation fundamentally changed my understanding of what I was dealing with. This wasn't a misunderstanding or even a single malicious lie. Carmen had apparently been planning and executing a sophisticated attack on my character for weeks or possibly months. The level of premeditation and coordination required suggested a depth of animosity that I had never suspected. I spent the next day reviewing every interaction I had had with Carmen over the past 6 months, searching for clues about when her attitude toward me might have changed. The analysis was disturbing because I couldn't identify any significant conflicts or turning points. Our relationship had seemed normal, affectionate, and supportive, right up until the accusations surfaced.
Marcus's investigation took on new urgency as we realized that Carmen might be planning additional attacks. He began monitoring my professional reputation online, tracking any mentions of my name or Henderson and Associates that might indicate spreading rumors or false information. I'm also going to trace her digital activity more aggressively, Marcus explained. If she's been researching your workplace and creating fake documents, there will be a trail of searches, downloads, and communications that we can follow. Meanwhile, the Cascade Electronics presentation was scheduled for the following week, and I couldn't afford to let the personal crisis affect this crucial professional opportunity. I doubled down on preparation, working late into the evenings to perfect every aspect of the campaign proposal. The presentation materials were exceptional, a comprehensive marketing strategy that addressed Cascade's specific challenges while showcasing Henderson's creative capabilities. Jennifer Park had created visual elements that perfectly complemented the strategic framework, and Diana had developed implementation timelines that demonstrated our attention to practical details. "This is some of your best work," Robert Manning commented as we reviewed the final presentation materials. "If we land Cascade, it will be largely because of the innovative approach you've developed." But even as I was achieving professional success, the personal attacks were intensifying. Marcus discovered that someone had been creating fake social media profiles using variations of my name and posting content designed to damage my reputation. The posts were subtle, not obvious lies that could be easily disproven, but misleading information that painted me as unprofessional and unreliable. "Whoever's doing this understands reputation management," Marcus observed. "They're not making dramatic, false claims that would trigger immediate skepticism. Instead, they're creating a pattern of small negative impressions that accumulate over time." The fake social media activity coincided with increased strange phone calls to Henderson and Associates. HR Director Linda Morrison called me in for a meeting to discuss what she described as unusual external interest in my employment status. "We've received several calls over the past week from people claiming to be potential clients, headhunters, or industry contacts asking for information about you. Individually, these calls might be normal, but the pattern is concerning. It feels like someone is conducting surveillance on your professional activities." I explained the situation as thoroughly as I could without revealing the full extent of the family conflict. Linda was supportive, but also had to protect the company's interests. "I believe you're the victim of some kind of harassment campaign," she said, "but I need you to understand that if this continues, it could affect your position here. We can't have employees who are the subject of ongoing investigations or controversies, regardless of whether the allegations are true." The ultimatum was politely delivered but unmistakably clear. I had to resolve this situation quickly, or my career at Henderson would be in jeopardy, despite my exemplary work record. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Carmen directly and asked to meet with her face-to-face for a serious conversation. When she agreed, I proposed meeting at a restaurant in downtown Portland, a public place where a conversation would be witnessed, but private enough for honest discussion. Carmen arrived at the restaurant looking relaxed and cheerful, showing no signs of stress or guilt that might indicate she was orchestrating a campaign against me. Her performance of normalcy was so convincing that I almost doubted the evidence Marcus had gathered. "You sounded really serious on the phone," she said as we were seated. "Is everything okay?" "Carmen, I need to ask you directly about the accusations you made to our parents, and I need to ask about the phone calls that have been made to my workplace." For just a moment, her expression flickered, a micro-expression of surprise or concern that was gone almost instantly. Then she looked genuinely confused. "What phone calls? Rebecca, I'm worried about you. You're acting paranoid and suspicious. Are you sure you're handling the stress of this situation okay?" The gaslighting was so smooth and practiced that I realized this wasn't the first time Carmen had manipulated reality to achieve her goals. She was attempting to make me doubt my own perceptions and conclusions, even when I had evidence to support them.
Someone has been impersonating background investigators and calling my colleagues to ask questions about my integrity, I said. Someone has been creating fake social media profiles using my name. Someone has been researching my workplace and my professional relationships. The timing of all this activity coincides exactly with your accusations to our parents. Carmen's response was a masterclass in deflection and manipulation. She expressed shock at the revelation, suggested that I might be the victim of corporate espionage, wondered aloud if a competitor might be trying to sabotage my career, and subtly implied that my stress about the family situation was making me see connections that didn't exist. "Rebecca, you're scaring me," she said, reaching across the table to touch my hand with apparent concern. "You're talking like you think I'm some kind of criminal mastermind who's plotting against you. That's not rational. Maybe you should consider talking to someone professionally about the stress you're under." The suggestion that I needed psychological help was the final piece of evidence I needed. Carmen was not only lying about her involvement in the attacks on my reputation, she was trying to undermine my credibility by suggesting that I was mentally unstable. This was a level of calculated cruelty that I had never imagined possible for my own sister. I ended the dinner abruptly, claiming I wasn't feeling well, and left Carmen at the restaurant. As I walked to my car, I called Marcus Webb. "I need you to accelerate the investigation, and I need you to prepare a comprehensive report that documents everything we found. I'm done trying to handle this quietly." "Are you sure you want to go public with this?" Marcus asked. "Once you make accusations against your sister, there's no going back to a normal family relationship." "There already isn't a normal family relationship," I said. "Carmen has made sure of that. Now I need to make sure she doesn't destroy my career in the process." The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in defamation and harassment cases. Elizabeth Harper was a partner at one of Portland's most respected law firms, and her reputation for handling complex family disputes was exactly what I needed. "Based on what you're describing, you have grounds for both civil and potentially criminal action," Elizabeth told me after reviewing Marcus's preliminary findings. "The fake investigations, the forged documents, and the systematic harassment constitute a pattern of behavior that goes well beyond simple family conflict. What I want most is for it to stop, but I also want people to know the truth about what happened." "Those goals might be compatible," Elizabeth said. "If we can demonstrate conclusively that your sister orchestrated this campaign against you, it will not only clear your name, but also establish consequences that will prevent her from attempting something similar in the future." As I left Elizabeth's office, I realized that I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. I was preparing to take legal action against my own sister, to expose her deception publicly, and to force my family to confront the truth about Carmen's character. The scared, defensive woman who had been blindsided by false accusations 2 months earlier was gone, replaced by someone who was determined to fight back with every resource at her disposal. The Cascade Electronics presentation was scheduled for the next day, and I intended to deliver the performance of my career. But I was also preparing for a much more important presentation, one that would reveal the truth about what had really been happening to my family and my reputation. The Cascade Electronics presentation took place on a Thursday morning in Henderson's largest conference room, with natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Portland skyline. Despite everything happening in my personal life, I had never felt more prepared for a professional challenge. The campaign we had developed was innovative, comprehensive, and perfectly tailored to Cascade's needs. More importantly, every element of it was meticulously documented as my original work. The Cascade team consisted of 5 executives, including CEO Jonathan Walsh and Marketing Director Sandra Kim. They listened attentively as I walked them through our strategic analysis, creative concepts, and implementation timeline. Jennifer Park's visual presentations were flawless, and Diana's operational planning addressed every practical concern they raised. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we were hoping to see," Jonathan Walsh commented as I concluded the main presentation. "Your understanding of our market position and the strategic challenges we face is remarkably thorough." The questions and answers session went even better than I had hoped.
Every inquiry about budget, timeline, or creative rationale was answered with confidence and detailed supporting data. By the time the Cascade team left to deliberate, I knew we had delivered a winning proposal. "That was exceptional work, Rebecca," Robert Manning said as we cleaned up the conference room. "I've been in this business for 20 years, and that was one of the most polished presentations I've ever seen." But even as I was achieving this professional triumph, Marcus Webb was putting the final touches on an investigation that would determine the trajectory of my personal life. That afternoon, he called with news that would change everything. "I have the complete picture now," Marcus told me over the phone, "and it's worse than we thought, but also more actionable than I had hoped."
We met at his office immediately after work. The conference table was covered with printed documents, screenshots, and a detailed timeline that mapped Carmen's activities over the past 4 months. "Your sister has been planning this attack since January," Marcus began, pointing to the earliest entries on his timeline. "She started by researching your company's organizational structure, identifying key personnel, and learning about your specific projects and responsibilities." The evidence was overwhelming. Marcus had traced Carmen's internet activity through various digital footprints she had left behind. She had created multiple fake email accounts, researched document forgery techniques, and studied reputation management strategies that would allow her to damage my credibility systematically. In February, she began creating the forged documents that she would later show to your parents, Marcus continued. She used sophisticated software to manipulate timestamps and metadata, but she made several technical errors that allowed me to identify the manipulation. The forged campaign materials were remarkably convincing forgeries of legitimate Henderson documents. Carmen had somehow obtained our internal templates and style guides, possibly through social engineering or by posing as a potential client. She had then created fictitious campaign concepts that resembled real work closely enough to seem authentic to people unfamiliar with the specific projects. "The most damaging discovery is this," Marcus said, placing a printed email chain in front of me. "Your sister has been in contact with someone at Brennan Marketing Group, Henderson's biggest competitor. The communications suggest she has been providing them with information about your upcoming campaigns in exchange for insider information about their strategies." The betrayal cut deeper than I had imagined possible. Carmen hadn't just been trying to destroy my reputation within our family. She had been selling confidential information about my work to our competitors. The attack on my character was part of a larger scheme that involved corporate espionage. "There's more," Marcus said grimly. "The fake investigators who called your workplace were coordinated with Brennan Marketing. They were trying to create a paper trail that would suggest Henderson was conducting internal investigations into employee integrity. If they could get your company to question your reliability, it would give Brennan an advantage in competitive situations." The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Carmen had partnered with a competitor to not only damage my personal reputation, but to undermine Henderson's competitive position. The fake social media profiles, the mysterious phone calls, and the forged documents were all part of a coordinated campaign designed to destroy my career and benefit Brennan Marketing. "Do we have enough evidence for criminal charges?" I asked, trying to process the magnitude of what Marcus had uncovered. "Corporate espionage, fraud, harassment, and defamation," Marcus confirmed. "This goes well beyond family conflict into serious criminal territory. But there's something else you need to know before you decide how to proceed." Marcus pulled out another set of documents, financial records that he had obtained through legitimate investigative channels. Carmen's bank account showed regular deposits from Brennan Marketing dating back to December of the previous year. "She's been on their payroll for 5 months, Marcus explained. "The payments started small, probably for basic information about Henderson's client roster, but they increased significantly in March, right around the time she intensified her campaign against you. The revelation that Carmen had been paid to destroy my reputation added a dimension of calculated greed to what I had assumed was purely personal animosity. She hadn't just decided to hurt me out of jealousy or resentment. She had been financially incentivized to cause as much damage as possible to both my career and my company." "What's the total amount?" I asked,
though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. $17,000 over 5 months, plus bonuses for specific intelligence deliverables. My sister had sold out our family relationship and my professional reputation for less money than I made in 2 months. The calculation was so coldly mercenary that it fundamentally changed how I understood Carmen's character. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a decision made in anger. It was a sustained business relationship built on betraying the people closest to her. That evening, I met with Elizabeth Harper to review the evidence and plan our next steps. Elizabeth was as shocked by the scope of the conspiracy as I had been. "This is one of the most comprehensive reputation attacks I've ever documented," she said, reviewing Marcus's findings. "Your sister and Brennan Marketing have committed multiple felonies in the process of trying to destroy your career. What are my options?" "You have several paths forward," Elizabeth explained. "You can pursue criminal charges through the district attorney's office, which would likely result in serious consequences for both Carmen and the Brennan employees involved. You can file civil lawsuits for damages, defamation, and conspiracy. Or you can use this evidence to force a settlement that includes public acknowledgement of your innocence and guarantees that the harassment will stop." "What about my family? My parents still believe Carmen's original accusations."
That's where the polygraph test comes in, Elizabeth said with a slight smile. Nothing clears someone's reputation more definitively than passing a professional polygraph examination. If you're willing to take the test, and if the results support your claims of innocence, it will be impossible for anyone to continue questioning your integrity. The polygraph test was scheduled for the following Monday at a professional testing facility in downtown Portland. Elizabeth had arranged for Dr. Patricia Moore, one of the region's most respected polygraph examiners, to conduct the examination. The test would be comprehensive, covering not just the specific accusations Carmen had made, but also the broader questions about my professional integrity and honesty. "I want the results to be made public immediately after the test," I told Elizabeth. "I want there to be no doubt about what the examination revealed." Over the weekend, I prepared for what I knew would be the most important test of my life. I reviewed every detail of my professional history, organized my thoughts about the accusations, and mentally rehearsed my responses to the questions Dr. Moore would ask. Michael was incredibly supportive during this final preparation phase. "You have nothing to worry about," he reassured me repeatedly. "You've been telling the truth from the beginning. The polygraph will just confirm what everyone who knows you already understands about your character." Sunday evening, I called Uncle James to give him a heads up about what was going to happen the next day. "Rebecca, I want you to know that I've been having serious doubts about Carmen's story for weeks. The inconsistencies have been bothering me, and your evidence about the forged documents was very convincing. Whatever the polygraph shows, I believe you." "What about my parents?" "They're struggling," James admitted. "They know they acted hastily, but they're embarrassed about doubting you. When the polygraph results come out, I think it will give them the excuse they need to admit they were wrong." Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Portland spring weather that matched my nervous energy. The polygraph facility was located in a nondescript office building, and Dr. Moore's examination room was sterile and professional. The polygraph equipment looked like something from a medical facility, sophisticated monitoring devices that would measure my physiological responses to each question. "The examination will take approximately 2 hours," Dr. Moore explained as she attached the monitoring sensors to my chest, arms, and fingers. "I'll ask you a series of control questions first to establish your baseline responses. Then we'll move to the specific questions about the accusations you're facing." The control questions were straightforward. My name, my age, my address, basic factual information that established how my body responded when I was telling the truth. Then Dr. Moore began asking about my professional history. Have you ever taken credit for work that was created by another person? No. Have you ever stolen ideas from colleagues at Henderson and Associates? No. Did you create the Morrison campaign materials that have been questioned? Yes. Have you ever engaged in any form of professional misconduct at your current job? No. The questions continued for over an hour, covering every aspect of the accusations Carmen had made. Dr. Moore asked about specific campaigns, about my relationships with colleagues, about my integrity in client dealings, and about my honesty in professional communications. Have you been truthful in all your responses during this examination? Yes. When the testing was complete, Dr. Moore began analyzing the results immediately. Elizabeth Harper had arranged for the examination to be expedited, with results available within hours rather than days. The analysis will take about an hour, Dr. Moore told me, as she removed the monitoring equipment. You can wait here, or I can call you when the results are ready. I chose to wait, spending the hour in the facility's small waiting room with Michael and Elizabeth. The nervous energy that had sustained me through months of investigation and preparation was finally beginning to fade, replaced by exhaustion and anticipation. When Dr. Moore called us back into her office, her expression was professional but reassuring. The results are definitive, she began, placing a formal report on her desk. Ms. Thompson showed no physiological indicators of deception during the examination. All responses to questions about professional integrity, honesty, and the specific accusations were consistent with truthful answers. In my professional opinion, she has been completely honest about her innocence regarding the charges of professional misconduct.
The relief was overwhelming, but it was quickly replaced by determination to ensure that everyone who had doubted me would see these results. I want this report released to the media immediately, I told Elizabeth. I want it sent to my family, to my employer, and to anyone else who might have heard Carmen's accusations. Are you sure you want this to be public? Elizabeth asked. Once this information is released, there will be significant consequences for your sister and for Brennan Marketing. I'm absolutely sure, I said without hesitation. Carmen made this public when she started spreading lies about me. Now everyone gets to see the truth. That afternoon, Elizabeth released a comprehensive statement to Portland's business media, including the polygraph results, Marcus's investigation findings, and documentation of the criminal conspiracy between Carmen and Brennan Marketing. The statement was accompanied by a demand that Carmen publicly retract her accusations and that Brennan Marketing face appropriate legal consequences for their role in the scheme. By evening, the story was being covered by local news outlets, industry publications, and social media. The headline that appeared in the Portland Business Journal was everything I had hoped for. Marketing executive vindicated by Polygraph after sister's false accusations linked to corporate espionage scheme. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Colleagues called to express support and outrage about what had been done to me. Clients reached out to reaffirm their confidence in my work. Industry contacts who had heard rumors about investigations were relieved to learn the truth. Most importantly, my parents called. "Rebecca, we are so sorry," my mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "We should have believed you from the beginning. We should have asked for proof before accepting Carmen's accusations. Can you ever forgive us?" The conversation with my parents was painful but healing. They explained how Carmen had manipulated them with carefully crafted lies and fabricated evidence. They acknowledged that their reaction had been unfair and premature. Most importantly, they committed to rebuilding the trust that had been damaged by their willingness to doubt me. The legal consequences for Carmen and Brennan Marketing unfolded over the following weeks. The district attorney's office filed criminal charges based on Marcus's evidence. Brennan Marketing faced not only criminal liability, but also civil lawsuits from Henderson and Associates for corporate espionage and unfair business practices. Carmen's arrest made the local news, and the details of her paid betrayal became public knowledge. The sister I had loved and trusted was revealed to be someone capable of calculated cruelty in exchange for relatively small financial gain. But perhaps the most satisfying vindication came from Henderson and Associates. Robert Manning called me into his office the day after the polygraph results were released. "Rebecca, I want you to know that the partners have complete confidence in your integrity. In fact, we'd like to offer you the senior director position we've been considering. Your handling of this crisis has demonstrated exactly the kind of character and judgment we want in our leadership team." The promotion I had been working toward for years was finally offered to me at the moment when my reputation had been most thoroughly tested and vindicated. The campaign to destroy my career had ultimately strengthened it beyond what I could have achieved through normal professional advancement. As I sat in my office that evening looking out at the Portland skyline and processing everything that had happened, I realized the ordeal had fundamentally changed me. I was no longer the trusting person who had assumed that family loyalty was unbreakable, but I was also stronger, more resilient, and more confident in my ability to fight for truth when it mattered most. The polygraph test had done more than clear my name. It had provided irrefutable proof that character and integrity could withstand even the most sophisticated attacks when they were built on genuine foundations. 3 months have passed since the polygraph results went viral across Portland's business community, and I'm sitting in my new corner office on the 18th floor of the Morrison Tower, watching the city wake up beneath a blanket of morning fog. The nameplate on my door reads, Rebecca Thompson, Senior Director of Strategic Marketing, but the title barely captures the transformation that brought me here. Yesterday marked exactly 1 year since Carmen first walked into my parents' house with her carefully constructed lies. The anniversary felt significant enough to warrant reflection on how completely my life has changed, not just the external circumstances, but the fundamental shifts in how I understand relationships, trust, and my own capabilities. The Henderson and Associates promotion came with responsibilities I had never imagined. I now oversee marketing strategies for Fortune 500 clients, manage a team of 15 professionals, and serve on the executive committee that determines company direction. The Cascade Electronics account has generated $12 million in revenue, making it our most profitable client relationship. But the real validation came last month when 3 competitors tried to recruit me with offers that would have doubled my previous salary.
"You've become something of a legend in this industry," Robert Manning told me during my annual review. "Not just for the quality of your work, but for how you handled a crisis that would have destroyed most people's careers. Clients specifically request you because they know you can be trusted under the most extreme circumstances." The irony continues to amaze me. Carmen's attempt to destroy my professional reputation has made me one of the most sought-after marketing strategists in the Pacific Northwest. The polygraph test that cleared my name has become a case study taught in crisis management courses at Portland State University. Students analyze how systematic documentation and strategic legal action can transform character assassination into career advancement. My personal life has stabilized in ways that feel both familiar and completely new. Michael and I got engaged last month during a hiking trip to Crater Lake, the same trail where we had some of our most difficult conversations during the worst of the crisis. The ring he chose reflects our shared appreciation for authentic beauty over flashy display. A simple platinum band with a single diamond that catches light without demanding attention. "I knew I wanted to marry you before any of this happened," Michael said as he proposed, overlooking the impossibly blue water. "But watching how you fought for the truth made me realize I was lucky enough to find someone with genuine courage and integrity. Those qualities are rarer than I thought." Our wedding planning has become an exercise in determining which relationships survived the testing of the past year. The guest list includes colleagues who defended my character without hesitation, friends who offered practical support during the investigation, and family members who eventually chose truth over convenient lies. It's a smaller circle than I once maintained, but the connections are deeper and more authentic. The rebuilding process with my parents required months of careful conversation and established boundaries that didn't exist before. They attend therapy sessions designed to help families recover from manipulation and betrayal. The sessions have been uncomfortable but necessary for understanding how Carmen's lies found fertile ground in assumptions they had never examined. We realize now that we had always treated Carmen's version of events as more entertaining than accurate, my mother admitted during one particularly difficult session.
We enjoyed her stories without considering whether they were fair to the people she was describing. When she started telling stories about you, we listened the same way. My father's engineering background has helped him process the technical aspects of Carmen's deception with something approaching professional appreciation. The sophistication of the document forgery and the coordination with Brennan Marketing show significant planning and skill, he said. It wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a sustained criminal enterprise. These conversations haven't restored our previous closeness, but they've established a foundation for relationships based on mutual respect rather than assumed loyalty. Sunday dinners have resumed, but they follow different patterns now. We discuss current projects and shared interests rather than family gossip. The boundaries feel healthier, even if they're less spontaneous. Uncle James has become an unexpected mentor in ways that extend beyond family dynamics. His willingness to examine evidence objectively during the crisis earned him a special place in my inner circle. Last month, he helped me evaluate investment opportunities that will accelerate my path to financial independence. His advice combines emotional support with practical wisdom in ways that feel genuinely helpful. You've learned skills during this crisis that most people never develop. Crisis management, legal strategy, reputation protection, team leadership under pressure, these are executive-level capabilities that usually take decades to acquire. The complete severing of my relationship with Carmen has been more emotionally complex than I anticipated. Grief for the sister I thought I knew competes with anger about the person she actually revealed herself to be. The mourning process has been complicated by the fact that she's still alive, but permanently removed from my life by legal restraining orders and geographic distance. Carmen's sentencing hearing provided closure I hadn't expected. Watching her accept responsibility for fraud, conspiracy, and corporate espionage while dressed in an orange jumpsuit felt surreal after 29 years of thinking I knew her character. The judge's comments about calculated betrayal of family trust for financial gain captured the essence of what had happened better than I could have expressed myself. The 18-month prison sentence means Carmen will be released next spring, but the felony convictions ensure that our paths will never cross professionally. The criminal record eliminates her eligibility for marketing positions, financial services roles, or any work requiring background checks. The civil judgment requires her to pay restitution that will take years to satisfy, assuming she can find employment at all. Professional opportunities have emerged that I never would have pursued before the crisis. I've been invited to join the board of directors for the Portland Marketing Association, serve as a mentor in the Women in Business Leadership program, and speak at the upcoming National Crisis Management Conference in Chicago. These roles position me as a thought leader in ways that pure technical competence never could have achieved. The speaking engagements have been particularly rewarding because they allow me to help other professionals who face character attacks or workplace betrayal. The practical advice I share about documentation, investigation techniques, and legal remedies comes from lived experience rather than theoretical knowledge. Audience response has been overwhelmingly positive, with several attendees reaching out months later to thank me for guidance that helped them navigate their own crises.
My friendship with Sarah Chen has evolved into a business partnership. We're launching a consulting firm that specializes in reputation management and crisis communication for marketing professionals. The venture combines her strategic planning expertise with my crisis management experience, targeting a market segment that traditional PR firms often overlook. What happened to you could happen to anyone in this industry, Sarah said, as we finalized our business plan. But most people don't know how to fight back effectively. We can change that by teaching them systematic approaches to protecting and rebuilding professional reputations. The deeper transformation has been internal rather than external. I no longer assume good intentions based on relationship history or family connections. Trust now requires consistent evidence over time rather than hope and assumption. This shift hasn't made me cynical, but it has made me more strategic about where I invest emotional energy and professional vulnerability. The polygraph test that vindicated me has become a symbol of how truth can prevail over sophisticated deception when it's defended with intelligence and persistence. But the real victory wasn't the test results. It was the systematic preparation that made those results inevitable. Character and integrity create their own evidence when they're practiced consistently over time. Looking forward, I see possibilities that emerge directly from surviving this crisis. The skills I developed, the network I built, and the reputation I established through adversity have created opportunities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. The sister who tried to destroy my life inadvertently launched me toward achievements I had never imagined possible. 6 months ago, I walked into that polygraph examination room knowing that the results would determine my future. Today, I understand that the real test had been happening every day for years through choices about honesty, documentation, and integrity. The polygraph just confirmed what consistent character had already been established. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.